Gautama Siddhartha was the son of a wealthy Brahmin family in northwest India. Religious tradition says he was a prince. After years of being isolated from the suffering of the world, Gautama had a life-changing experience, opening his eyes to the fact that hunger, sickness, age, and death was all around him. He left his family and riches to travel as a monk to seek enlightenment. First, he studied to be a master of meditation and yogi. However, he felt he was no closer to reaching enlightenment after so much training. Next, he tried starving himself in complete self-denial. It nearly killed him, making him so weak he almost drowned. This made him realize that neither extravagance nor denial were good, and that he had always lived for the extreme. From that point on, he decided to live a new way, what he called the middle path. He developed a very passive form of meditation and focused on complete awareness of himself, his surroundings, thoughts, and emotions. From these observations, he formed some very simple postulates. Number 1, reality is suffering. Everyone I know tells me they're not suffering when I tell them this. Only emo and depressed types agree with this. Sadly, this is a mistranslation. The term that is usually translated as suffering is better translated as disappointment, or even more, withdrawals from addiction. Everything we do seems to have at least a little disappointment. Even waking up in the morning to an alarm clock and realizing it's already time to get up. We're disappointed that we couldn't sleep longer. Gautama did not actually see himself as a philosopher. He instead saw himself as more of a doctor. He identified a problem based on symptoms and attempted to find a cure. The disease was withdrawals or disappointment. He didn't know this, but our brain is a biochemical computer. It is run on chemicals. However, imbalances can occur, and we can get addicted to chemicals or emotions made by our own mind. Why there is so much pain and sadness at the loss of something we hold dear. We can get addicted to any emotion. Pain, grief, fear. Infatuation is especially powerful, why it feels like someone tore your heart out when you lose in love. Infatuation causes a serious influx of dopamine and has all the same patterns as cocaine. When you are with the person, every little thing they do is the greatest thing in the world. When they're not around you, you feel dirty. Everything is wrong. You can easily get emotional and depressed. Reality becomes distorted. You will do and say things to continue to get your fix from them. When they break up with you, you feel like there's nothing worth living for. You mope and cry. Then after a while, you learn to adapt to the symptoms, and you can begin forgetting. After a while, you can realize that person wasn't all that amazing, and why were you so into them? You can live just fine without that person. Cocaine addicts are fine without it when it is out of sight, out of mind. However, if they suddenly had the opportunity to get some, all those cravings and memories would come back to them. The same is true with infatuation. Withdrawal is the disease. Gautama postulated the second truth, that the cause of suffering or withdrawal was caused by our desires. The third truth is that being content and not desiring will end suffering. If we did not desire, we would not be disappointed. Life would continue to flow like it always has, and we wouldn't ask anything from life or assume we had the right to ask life things because we believe we deserve it. As the Buddha said, life is hard because we expect it to be easy. The fourth truth is his eightfold path, meant to lead to this contentment. Being content, however, does not mean going without or shunning anything. It involves developing your self-control and learning to enjoy something while being fully aware of the dangers it poses. According to Tantric Buddhism, abstinence is just as enslaving as indulgence, as you will be fixated on what you can't have instead of what you do have. When I tell people about not being addicted to their own emotions and to be content, their first reaction is to look down on the idea and assume I mean we should have no emotion like Spock or a robot and suppress it all. What it should be is that we should be aware of the power emotions can have, and if they are damaging, such as in the case of depression, we should try to learn contentment. Plato looked on emotions as the horses and our logic as the charioteer. Our emotions are powerful motivators. However, more recent studies have made a more accurate analogy. Emotions are the elephants and we are the rider. We have to know how to control and restrict our emotions, as well as understand them and be aware of how they act and react, know how they tick and what they respond to, or they can go wherever they want to. Now we see how these three elements work together to damage us. Let's just take the 7 deadly sins. Greed, gluttony, wrath, envy, and lust are addictions. Sloth is, of course, laziness. Pride, in terms of looking down on someone else, is a form of ignorance. And that is all prejudice is. The person is completely ignorant that the other person may have better ways of doing things. Studies have shown that gluttony and overeating, especially with carbohydrates, release dopamine, just like cocaine, just on a much lower level. However, at certain points, just like with any drug, the body will be desensitized to the stimulus and will require more intake to get the same rush. Most of the things that help us survive, like sex drive and hunger, are wired into our very nature, and we receive dopamine from the reward pathway system when we accomplish them. It is our very drives that prove to us that we are animals, and there is nothing wrong with them. We are learning more and more through science every day how to better live in harmony with nature. We have made roads and houses and completely remade the world in a way that we can have maximum enjoyment and comfort, if people actually listen to the scientists. Our mind is no different. We are slowly building infrastructure in our minds using mental constructs, finding ways to enjoy and many times gain positive benefits from nature without having to deal with all the deadly and destructive things that come with nature. The nature that you see, unless you go to a third world country, is tamed. It is beautiful, enjoyable, and breathtaking, but it's almost completely safe compared to how it was before we tamed it. It was dangerous and ruthless, just like our emotions. Sure, mistakes were made along the way in terms of environmental destruction, but I would like to believe at a certain point that humans will be able to live in synergy with nature, just like we are learning to live in synergy with our emotions through better psychology and neurology, without denying our emotions, but not letting them control us.